this is a rant, and I'm sure someone will be pissed off by the end of this video because they'll feel personally attacked. But that's cool. As I've argued in previous work, black celebrities are a central part of black American culture, for better or for worse. Because entertainment and athletics are the two areas that black people have been most welcomed in and loudly celebrated, specifically for their monetary value, leaders who emerge from these groups are more known among the populace than black intellectuals and academics in various fields. Sure, black intellectuals get viral tweets and news stories, especially as of late, but the proliferation of celebrity culture is central to Americans as a whole. And a key difference is that in addition to white celebrities, white Americans have traditionally dominated classrooms, curriculums, and intellectual spaces and influenced popular thought and politics. Black intellectuals and innovators have not been given the space to turn into household names as much as black celebrities. As a result, the politically oriented speeches or ramblings of black celebrities have the power to influence, like with the clothes they wear, the cars they buy, and the surgeries they obtain. So what happens when black celebrities are at best clumsy in the information they perpetuate, and at worst, willfully ignorant and loud? What happens when they're so woke that they ignore reality and perpetuate the white patriarchal dominance that they have been coveting their own version of? Speaking of that word, I've always disliked woke because it usually means contrarian. You know, those who love to declare themselves as better informed free thinkers, and that the communities who help support them are brainwashed sheep or lazy liars perpetuating a myth of black oppression. How and why do these wokies exist and thrive, and who do they attract? In this episode of Celebrity, we'll be discussing the woke black celeb. Black athletes have long found themselves entangled in politics, and when they're vocally opposed to the black majority, they get good press and reputations, or at the very least, aren't told to stick to playing sports. When legendary Olympic gold medalist and The Ohio State University alum Jesse Owens left the competitive circuit for the pros in 1936, he was desperate for money. Keep in mind that my alma mater shamefully did not offer Jesse a scholarship while he competed on the track team and won 8 NCAA championships, so he worked his way through school. His limited abilities as an amateur for the Olympics weren't lucrative either. Time magazine reported, with very little money in his pocket, sprinter Owens made no secret of the fact that he was returning to the US to cash in on his athletic reputation for all it was worth. Owens himself announced, "I'm busted and know the difficulties encountered by any member of my race in getting financial security." Keep in mind that the young Olympian had a wife, daughter, and another on the way. So it was a no-brainer when he was approached by campaigners for the anti-New Deal oil tycoon Republican Alf Landon. In exchange for a grip of cash, Owens would tour 30 states in the midst of the Great Depression and champion Alf as a protector of economic rights who would create more jobs. Alf Landon, facing a populace that remembered the swift action of the incumbent FDR, had no shot at winning, though he did net 17 million votes, ultimately 10 million less than FDR. Most black Americans had been Republican until FDR's New Deal made the Democrat Party more helpful to black quality of life, and therefore more appealing. Alf Landon claimed to agree with most principles of the New Deal, but also said it was too hostile to business. He also called Social Security a waste. Owens said at the time, "This country was built on the sweat and blood of the Negro race, and this fact hasn't yet been recognized. I believe Governor Landon will recognize it. His election will be good for America and for the people of the colored race. I want to meet Governor Landon personally." Jesse Owens would later go on to describe this period of shucking and jiving as the poorest race I ever ran, but they paid me a lot. I won't say how much, but a lot. I was the guy who was the beginning of the celebrity stable in political campaigns, I guess. The accomplished track star had also been approached by Democrats after all, but Republicans put up the most money. Said one 1936 observer, "The Republican victory is simply another indication that the Negro vote has seldom been so important to a campaign, and that rarely has a fair means or foul struggle for it been more nauseating." In 1938, boxer Joe Louis stunned the world with a heavyweight title victory over Nazi Germany champion Max Schmeling. The infamous rematch, along with other Depression-era fights, brought Joe Louis fame and admiration and clout. Wrote Langston Hughes, each time Joe Louis won a fight in those Depression years, even before he became champion, thousands of black Americans on relief or WPA and poor would throng out into the streets all across the land to march and cheer and yell and cry because of Joe's one-man triumphs. No one else in the United States has ever had such an effect on Negro emotions, or on mine. I marched and cheered and yelled and cried too. Joe Louis was effectively the first nationwide black hero, and a preview of the kind of super celebrity that black athletes attain in the modern era. While mainstream press still covered him with racist language, his popularity only surged in the black community. During the 1940 elections, in which FDR ran for a third term in office, Joe Louis put his might behind Republican Wendell Willkie. Though FDR was successfully managing the fallout of the Great Depression, he was not prioritizing one of the biggest black concerns, anti-lynching. Said Joe Louis, "I am for Willkie because he stands for what is best for us colored people, because this administration failed to pass the anti-lynching bill, and because you all know that jobs are better than relief." This demonstrates that while Louis supported legislation that overtly tackled racism, like being anti-police brutality in modern times, he still wanted to dismantle the new and fragile social safety net, like being anti-welfare in modern times. FDR won 38 of 48 states and a total of 449 electoral votes compared to Willkie's 82.
What's your occupation?
Fido, and let's get at them jobs.
Joe went on to continue to be a role player in politics, publicly enlisting in the Army a month to the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. 2 months later, when asked about the war, he said, "We'll win, 'cause we're on God's side." This was reported widely in the media, and coverage of the athlete in news became a lot less racist. It's worth noting that in addition to experiencing racism during his time in the military, Louis fought in tons of charity boxing matches with the proceeds going to the Army, and he ain't see a penny for most of it. But he was still heavily taxed by the IRS, sending him into debt and poverty. Despite this, Louis was paraded around for military recruitment purposes and applauded by whites for his commitment to American values and defense. Of the over $4.6 million generated during his boxing career, Louis only pocketed about $800,000 due to scheming handlers. He spent lavishly on his family, started several failed businesses, and was known to pay back welfare money on behalf of his family. And again, most of those charity fights he participated in culminated in him donating his winnings to the United States military. So basically, he was like burning cash with an American flag lighter. For all his political motivations, Louis never championed that black World War II veterans like himself should receive a proportionate share of GI Bill funds, aka the bill that propelled many white Americans and their offspring into the middle class for generations through cheap home, business, and college loans. Fast forward to 1968, when Richard Nixon is running for president and supremely unpopular with the black community. His dog whistle calls about maintaining law and order, along with his treatment of a jailed Martin Luther King Jr. earlier in the decade, are not easily obscured. When he arrived at MLK's funeral in April 1968, the only reason he was allowed in was at the insistence of basketball star Wilt Chamberlain. Speaking of Chamberlain, he was one of a handful of black celebrities, including James Brown and Sammy Davis Jr., who would vocally support Nixon in a time when he was despised by most black Americans. As it turned out, the support came at a cost. As discussed by Leah Wright Riguer in The Loneliness of the Black Republican, Wilt received federal funds for one of his restaurants. This wasn't uncommon among black professional athletes who were the prime targets of Nixon-approved financing for black athlete entrepreneurs. Former Pittsburgh Steeler Brady Keys got federal funding for his All-Pro Chicken restaurants, which had 150 franchises in 11 cities by 1970. Many were opened by other black athletes with the help of federal financing. Brady Keys was an advocate for black businesses and franchising who successfully helped usher in more fast food restaurants like Burger King into black neighborhoods, which is good and bad depending on how you view it. In 1972, he was appointed to Nixon's Minority Business Advisory Board. So even while Nixon sneakily moved to privatize housing to the detriment of poor black Americans, organized a lengthy and ultimately deadly war on drugs, and a host of other things I discuss at length in Lectual Does the 70s, he was appealing to wealthy black Americans, even if they weren't all loud about it like Wilt Chamberlain or Sammy Davis Jr. Being loud about such contrarian support could damage one's career, like in the case of the latter celebrity. When Sammy popped up at the 1972 GOP convention to endorse Nixon, he was dragged by the black community. Sammy had been a donor to the Black Panther Party and supported Bobby Seale for mayor of Oakland, but that went out the window with his support of Nixon. He was further ostracized after he went on a United Service Organization trip to Vietnam, which was increasingly unpopular and also being disproportionately fought by poor black men. When Nixon's administration noticed Sammy's falling popularity with the black community, he distanced himself. Sammy later admitting to regretting supporting Tricky Dick. Speaking of the war in Nam, Ronald Reagan loudly supported the Vietnam War, saying that America had fought for a noble cause. This is the same war that boxing champion Muhammad Ali was drafted to fight in.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some darker people or some poor hungry people in the mud for big powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. What, I'm going to shoot them for what? How am I going to shoot them? Them little poor little black people, little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? Just take me to jail.
After defying draft orders, Muhammad Ali became one of the most hated men in the country, but his defiance further added passion to the ongoing civil rights and black power movements. The protests meant Ali spent 3.5 years of his athletic prime stripped of his boxing license. So it was totally shocking when he came out in support of Ronald Reagan's re-election in 1984. He was noted as saying, "He's keeping God in schools, and that's enough." Reagan at the time was increasingly unpopular with black Americans, and he secured only around 9% of their vote. Now, let's fast forward a few years because I can't leave this era without bringing up an infamous black contrarian moment, not with an athlete, but a rapper. The first time Eazy-E was being contacted by someone in the federal government, it was in 1989 when the FBI claimed that lyrics on Fuck the Police and Straight Outta Compton encouraged violence against cops. The second time, in 1991, the hardcore gangster rapper was receiving a luncheon invitation from Republican Senate leader Bob Dole. President George H.W. Bush was scheduled to speak. The LA Times reported that Eazy-E received his invitation to the closed-door fundraiser after he contributed $2,490 to the Republican Party at the urging of Senator Phil Gramm of Texas. It was also reported that Eazy-E was a big Bush fan. Eazy-E dined on poached salmon and roast beef in the company of Arnold Schwarzenegger and other members of the Republican inner circle. Former bandmate Ice Cube immortalized the incident in the closing verse of his diss song No Vaseline, chanting, "I'd never have dinner with the president." Some claim that the ill-fated yet publicized dinner attendance was just a publicity stunt by Eazy-E, but even so, it demonstrates how faux political insight, or wokeness, can generate benefits for a celebrity starving for attention. Maybe Ice Cube would never have dinner with the president, but he did meet with Trump in October 2020, a month before a contentious election that could very well have accelerated American fascism. Ice Cube explained, "I didn't run to go work with any campaign. Both campaigns contacted me. Both campaigns wanted to talk to me about the contract with Black America. One campaign said, 'We love what you have, but let's really dig into it after the election.' And one campaign said, 'We love what you have. Do you mind talking to us about it?' And that's what I did. So I didn't run to nobody." Whatever helps you sleep at night, nigga. Another contemporary woke black celeb is rapper, businessman, and activist Killer Mike, who met up with the cheating Governor Brian Kemp. Of course, Brian Kemp did keep his promise to get a haircut at Killer Mike's barbershop, so maybe he isn't a total piece of shit. Then there's the Democrat-leaning Jay-Z, whose partnership with the NFL over mitigating police brutality continues to perplex. The NFL just settled a $1 billion lawsuit because for years, in addition to punishing players players for kneeling, it assumed black players started out with lower cognitive function and used that as a basis to pay them less over brain injury claims. I remember when people told us skeptics that Jay-Z is playing chess, not checkers, but it seems more like a rigged casino game to me. While Jay-Z's political philosophy is best represented by the lyric, "What's better than one black billionaire?" Celebrities like Ice Cube and Killer Mike claim to want to work with anybody who will listen and actually do something, but Republicans have shown themselves to be committed to voter suppression, in addition to aggressive dismantling of social protections that do more for poor black Americans than absolutely nothing at all. By the way, between January 1st and May 14th, 14 states passed 22 laws to restrict voting rights, and yes, those were in Republican-led states who have been falsely claiming the November elections were racked with fraud. Where have Jay-Z, Killer Mike, and Ice Cube been for these conversations? Jay-Z is too busy buying Bentleys for other billionaires like New England's Patriots owner Robert Kraft. These same celebrities refuse to acknowledge class issues as a systemic component of oppression. Yes, they'll champion black businesses and the exploitation of other races who can serve as our replacement in the food chain, but they don't actively critique capitalism as an inherently flawed system, nor do they seek to change it from their vantage points at the top. And that's not rare in the black community, but it's also definitely not revolutionary or woke in the traditional sense of the word. It's not special. Sure, they'll show out for anti-police brutality protests or lend their Instagram posts to the cause, but do they ever give a fuck about class issues? No! So it's never shocking when they support Republicans in ramping up privatization and destroying social safety nets barely held together by progressive Democrats, and whine about progressive wealth taxes as the reason they support candidates who mobilize and weaponize white supremacy. Most importantly, these woke black celebs may not be publicly joined by crowds of like-minded black cohorts, but voting statistics show that woke black celebs are not alone. They're supported by those who point to Democrats as not caring about black America, when Democratic policies seem too supportive of women living outside the expectations of family values sanctioned living, LGBT rights, immigrants, or other issues that are often entangled with conspiracy theories, ensnaring those in our communities who are hungry for knowledge and power, even at the expense of logic and common sense. This brings me to another flavor of black contrarian celebs today, the conspiracy theorists feeding the we was kings and queens to hotep pipeline. Excuse me, the wokies, like the anti-Semitic and serial reproduction artist Nick Cannon, the 5G is dangerous Carrie Hilson, and the plethora of black celebrities and influencers who claim COVID-19 to be a global scam out to enslave people, kill off elders, and other malarkey. It has been tough for the past year to watch so many black people invoke aryan supremacist logic about American Jews when fundamentalist and evangelical Christianity wreaks havoc on this country and has been at the heart of colonialism, forced conversions, and the slave trade for centuries. It's also weird to see these same anti-Semites insist that Jews are bad because they're rich and powerful and keep their wealth in their own community, and then insist that wealth building is fundamental for our own community and that we should focus on doing the same. Are white American Jews beneficiaries of the same white privilege extended to white people as a whole? Fuck yes. And that's totally a conversation worth having. But are they evil and part of a conspiracy to do XYZ to black Americans? Only if you've been sucked into the dark vortex of conspiratorial thinking that plagues those without common sense and nuanced reasoning skills. It's also been tough to witness black people pull out Asian stereotypes and unfiltered hatred when both discussing legitimate experiences of racism and pontificating on the origins of COVID-19. So seeing black celebrities and influencers fan anti-Semitic and anti-Asian flames with extremely bad takes has been especially painful. Another thing to look out for in the coming months and years are the numbers of right-leaning black Americans who fall down the slippery slope of anti-Semitism to QAnon conspiracy theories, which become much more believable after you descend the iceberg of absurdity. I find that it's black people who not only lack critical thinking skills, but also black people craving black history and narratives about history that make them feel superior because they've been conditioned by white supremacy to deify certain humans and dehumanize others. You know, those lopsided hotepi beliefs that we all descended from pharaohs, queens, and kings instead of laborers, nameless warriors, house girls, and other unglamorous things, or that Africa was a harmonious Wakanda before white men arrived and destroyed it, instead of the reality that white men arrived and exploited already existing issues between very different groups who never identified as African in the first place. Two major things that racist right-wing conspiracy theorists have in common with black conspiracy wokies are conservative religious values and a desire to feel superior to another group of humans, even while ignoring all biological and historical data to the contrary. And of course, these things serve as a jumping off point for other ideas that bring these groups together, even if they are fundamentally opposed. You know, that slippery slope of anti-Semitism, misogyny, rape culture, homophobia, etc. While abhorrent and nonsensical conspiracy theories make the rounds, those who speak on painfully obvious and provable things are silenced or ridiculed, like rapper and activist NoName, who has been continually criticized and dragged for speaking on anti-capitalist and radical ideas by people who don't go nearly as hard to critique J. Cole, Jay-Z, Killer Mike, and Ice Cube. I don't agree with everything she believes or with everything that anybody believes, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I find it absurd, yet unsurprising, that people called her a hater for speaking on the American system in a real way. She's been called a hater numerous times for commenting on wealth porn culture and other celebrities, and it's a reminder that intelligence in our community is only welcome when the target of criticism is white people and racism, not black people and our conditioning to uphold white supremacy and capitalism. I applaud her, like I do all black leftists more radical than I, for never relenting on criticizing our current political system and politicians, especially because as a celebrity and rapper, it does absolutely nothing to benefit her career in the long run. Let's face it, black celebrity political endorsements as a whole usually feel hollow. Rich black people cheering for neoliberal candidates who have no plans to fundamentally change the exploitative nature of capitalism is not as inspiring as it was in high school, when I personally showed up every day with Obama election buttons on my chest. Oh my God, please don't drag me. These moderate Democrats represent a large portion of our community and will get their own discussion in my future content. But I bring it up to illustrate that I do understand the futility of most political endorsements. Even still, it's worse when a black millionaire or billionaire insists in yet another election that Republicans, the party that hates poor people more than it hates poverty and proposes new voter suppression legislation every year, will be the best choice. When they do this, they're not only enticing the young and ignorant, but reinforcing the values of those who are center, right, and middle class. Those who would favor a progressive wealth tax or raising the federal minimum wage, but not if it means letting gay people adopt children or seeing full-service sex work being decriminalized. As I've discussed in How to Be Black, any organization and mobilization must take into account how certain social issues will automatically push certain black Americans right down a slippery slope of hate and conspiracies, even at the expense of class and racial progress. Otherwise, the tribalization and fractured political power will continue. Reading is fundamental, and it requires more than the copious consumption of viral Twitter threads and TikToks with questionable takes. Synthesizing information is also fundamental, and it means considering things from all sides and perspectives. All of this is preferable to being woke. It's a cheap term that all too often is attached to people who, like broken clocks, are right 2 times a day and broken at all other hours. And what of the black celebs who, as the entire Celebrity series continues to stress, are increasingly important to young minds, societal trends, and the political landscape? Let's be real, they're faced with a few choices. If they speak on social justice issues, their audience may begin to project new standards on them, expect them to be knowledgeable on everything, and look to for comments whenever something tragic happens. They also face backlash from people who say they're doing things for publicity or being fake. Essentially, attracting a knowledgeable fan base opens them up to more scrutiny if they make a misstep or appear to not care about certain issues enough. But if black celebrities say nothing at all about social justice issues, they risk being labeled as apathetic. To me, this is better than announcing horrific takes, but if they feel really compelled about making change happen, what can they do instead? They can definitely not be like Lil Wayne or Asian Doll and endorse the politician that they think will make them richer, unashamedly putting their wallets over the black community. And if they want to raise the bar off the ground, the #1 rule should be avoiding the Kanye route at all costs, not telling the world you don't read. Secondly, if celebrities really want to help, 9 times out of 10, the best way to do that is announcing somebody who knows what they're talking about. Say a grassroots activist or organizer or a professor or educator or someone who studies the issues they claim to want to fix. Now, of course, are most celebrities going to do this? No. Certainly not the woke, read, contrarian ones who have made themselves notorious for going against the grain. In our increasingly fractured world, full of cultural wars and differing ideas about the future, black celebrities can always grab press attention with social justice headlines, even if it isn't always good. They can also seize on increasingly tribalized groups of consumers who want to support celebrities with similar political values. So, why do woke black celebrities exist? Because there's a market for it. When Kanye West publicly loved on Trump and sank $6 to $10 million into his abysmally ill-fated presidential campaign, racking up the vote of 60,000 desperately lost souls, he lost his wife and lots of respect, but he made history. His ugly ass shoes still sell out, magazines still write weird worshipy stories about him that make excuses for his lapses in alleged genius, and if he were to drop an album today, it's gonna still sell. He got lots of publicity for being a public fool, maintained his status because of his celebrity, and who knows what else he got behind the scenes. As the 20th century history of woke black celebs revealed, there's always something to gain from being different from those other Negroes.